Good evening, Mount Vernon. This is Mayor Shawyn Patterson Howard. Thank you for joining us on today, Sunday, March 14th, 2021, for Sundays with Shawyn. Tonight, we have a very, very important discussion on police reform. We put together a police reform commission in 2020, and that was in response to Governor Cuomo's Police Reform Commission executive order that he put out in August of 2020. This is a very important conversation. The Police Reform Commission has issued a report, and it can be found on cmvny.com. It can be found on our Facebook pages for CMVNY, as well as my Mayor Shawyn Patterson Howard and the police department's social media pages. We have sent it out via our email blast. And you will have until the 21st, which is next Sunday, to provide public comments. But tonight we have with us our four Police Reform Commission co-chairs, which is Danielle Brown. She is a local attorney. We have our Senator Jamal Bailey, our New York State Senator. We have our Deputy Commissioner Jennifer Lackard, and hopefully soon we will have joining us our Councilman Derek Thompson, who serves as the fourth co-chair. But today I just have to mark a moment in history. It was 1 year ago today that we really began looking at this executive order around pause, around COVID. So it's really today marks 1 year anniversary of the executive order being issued for COVID and when our lives changed. So we want to take this moment out to remember all of those that we have lost here in Mount Vernon, those who have survived and come through. And remember, we are still fighting this. COVID is not over. Vaccinations are available, but that doesn't mean that we do not have to be vigilant against protecting ourselves, our family, and our community from this disease. There are many people who have survived, but some still have long-lasting impacts. And so this is nothing to be played with. If you're interested in the vaccine, please reach out to Mount Vernon Hospital, Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center. There's the COVID testing site, the FEMA COVID testing site in Yonkers. Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center, within hopefully a week or so, will be a permanent COVID vaccination site. They are a federally qualified health center, and so we will be offering vaccines at the neighborhood health center. That was just announced on Friday by the White House, so we're waiting to get further details on that. But please stay focused. We are working with other organizations within the city to identify more sites. We are hoping that the CVS comes online, both the CVS on Sanford and Fulton and the CVS in Fleetwood. So CVSs are supposed to be COVID vaccination sites, but we will have more sites and steady sites available. So thank you for your patience. Moving from something very heavy and very serious to something celebratory, I just want to give a shout out to Coach Bob Cimino and our Mount Vernon Knights varsity basketball team. Yesterday, they won the Westchester basketball championship. Yes, in a pandemic, we had a very quick season, but Mount Vernon still put it down. I had an opportunity towards the end of the season to go to a few games and watch them live. And I want to just let you know that our young men, they persevered, they pressed, they wore their masks. It's not easy. It's not easy doing a lot of physical activity in a mask. It's more than a notion, but they made the necessary adjustments and they have come through. Now, because it was a truncated season, they're not playing at the county center. They're not going upstate. But I, as the mayor, have already promised Coach Cimino, and I told him it at the beginning of the season, I said, if y'all win, I will go out and get y'all the gold ball. And I think more than anything, in the midst of a pandemic, them being able to bring home this win for the community is not only big for them, but it's big for Mount Vernon. We all need something to celebrate. So again, shout out to our Mount Vernon Knights. So with that being said, we're going to ask that you please take a moment to share this video as we will be speaking about the work done by our Police Reform Commission. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it over first to our Senator Jamal Bailey so he can give us a high-level view of police reform in the state of New York and why this was put out, and we're going to start there. Thank you. So, Senator Bailey?
Madam Mayor, thank you very much, and just thank you for inviting me to DC Lackard and Attorney Brown. Thank you for your leadership, and I want to underline exactly what their leadership was. Yes, I was a co-chair, but I want to really underline the immense amount of work that these ladies and all of the other individuals, the residents of Mount Vernon, did on this. As elected officials, sometimes we get credit, and sometimes when you get credit, you have to make sure you give the credit that is actually due. So the credit that is actually due is due to the residents in the city of Mount Vernon who stepped up and wanted to do something major. And they wanted to make sure that their voices were heard relating to police reform. Now, police reform is something that, as the chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Codes, is something that I have taken on as a mission in the state. I was the sponsor of the bill to repeal 50A, to put the special prosecutor in place, and a number of other police reforms that we passed along with our colleagues in the state assembly in this past June. However, that it doesn't stop there. The repeal of 50A is no magic bullet. However much time and attention that it got. And what we saw this summer, and what we saw from Amy Cooper to George Floyd, is that policing still needs work. We don't want to vilify police. We don't want to destroy police. We don't want to say that they're all bad, but we have to make the recognition and understanding that we have work to do. And as Madam Mayor, you mentioned from a higher level view, I think that we're all on the same plane, but just looking at it from a statewide view, there's a lot more to do. So it's not just Mount Vernon, it's every municipality throughout the state that receives federal or state funding. They have to comply with the governor's executive order relating to creating a plan about how do we move forward with policing. Now, I have two counties, as many of you may know. I represent the Bronx and the city of Mount Vernon. So in the Bronx, there is a draft plan related to the reform of the NYPD. And in Mount Vernon, what we're going to be speaking about is related to the city of Mount Vernon. Even though the municipalities may differ, there are certain similarities that we're going to talk about, which are in reality that we need to make sure that there are better police community relations, and that it doesn't stop at the submission of this draft plan. Once we submit this draft plan, this is the first step, not the last step. Just because we have a report and a recommendation that has been worked hard on by these amazing members doesn't mean this is where we stop with police reform. Police reform is an ongoing, continuing, evolutionary process, and it starts with us, and it starts with the members of the Mount Vernon Police Department. I will say before I yield to DC Lackard and Attorney Brown to go over in depth a little bit more, then I'll come back. I just want to touch on some of the things that have been happening in Rochester. We know what's happened with Daniel Prude and the unfortunate result that the grand jury came back with there, and we know what happened with a 9-year-old young lady who was pepper sprayed in the city of Rochester. There's a lot happening with our brothers and sisters upstate as well. And that should illustrate that this is not just a urban thing. It's not just a downstate thing. It's not just an upstate thing. It is happening, and it's happening consistently, which is why we need to make sure that the plans are in place so that we can come together as one city. And I'm just really excited to be here. We'll go over specific top lines, and thank you for having me here on a Sunday.
Thank you so much, Senator Bailey. Always appreciate your leadership on a state level, as well as your involvement locally. You know, I know Mount Vernon is a small part of your district, but that never precludes you from being involved and coming to the table and helping us work through and push through and ensuring that we're operating, you know, in excellence, and that we're being progressive in our thinking and what we want to improve the relationships between the police and the community, and to ensure that public safety is something that is reliable, that is much more predictable, and that everyone feels that they are served equitably, because that is also important. So with that being said, I want to switch over to Ms. Danielle Brown, who is one of our co-chairs as well. And if you can kind of just take this conversation to the next level, Ms. Brown.
Absolutely. So what I want to dive into, Malcolm, if you can put the slides up for me, just want to kind of give some background on the commission, right? So the commission was 27 diverse members of the community. We had members who were community advocates, a part of faith-based community groups. They were business owners. We had law enforcement professionals, mental health professionals, and some service providers. And we were able to establish 43 recommendations. And the recommendations span across 5 sub areas, right? So we talked about transparency and accountability. We also have some recommendations based on policies, procedures, and training. Also qualifications, recruitment, and retention, because that's also a huge issue in Mount Vernon. Community engagement. Senator Jamal Bailey talked about that just now, increasing that community engagement. And we also have some equipment recommendations. You can go to the next slide, Malcolm. So just for everyone who's listening, these aren't all of the recommendations. What I've done is pulled out some of the recommendations just to highlight a few. But like the mayor said, you can see a draft report or a report on the city's website at cmvny.com. And you can also provide your feedback or any suggestions you have by emailing communications@cmvny.com. So as far as transparency and accountability goes, the city knows that we want to increase transparency, and we want to do that through a public-facing website and also through social media channels. And we want to make sure that we are including English and Spanish and Portuguese language translations on the site as well, because we have a huge population that speaks Spanish and Portuguese as well. Through the recommendations, we've also asked that the police department be amenable to if our population changes and we have a dominant language that isn't represented in the report, that we adjust to that as well. When we conducted when we started doing our recommendations, we did a survey through the community, and we received some good feedback. Unfortunately, based on our time frame, we weren't able to get a huge amount of feedback, but this is a recommendation that we have for the department, is to conduct these annual surveys for the community so that they can have an idea of how the residents feel about the police department at any given time. And also it gives them an opportunity to grow and learn how they're progressing as far as perception goes in the community, right? It's important to note and to collaborate with the community residents. So that's why that's one of our recommendations. We also recommended that we have a dedicated information officer. So this is someone who can, take the data and the statistics that the police department has and put it forth to the public so that we can be more informed residents of Mount Vernon and participate in the process a little bit more. So this is someone who will be able to update the website frequently, update social media, do press conferences if necessary, just so that the public can be more informed about what's happening with the police department. Another recommendation that we have is, improvement to the current civilian complaint process. We want to move that to an online process so that people feel comfortable if they have a personnel complaint, that they can go ahead and do that online and don't feel like they be subject to any retaliation, or that they have to go in front of a police officer to report on another police officer. You can understand why that may cause some hesitation. So we want to improve that current process so that people feel more comfortable making those complaints. And also under transparency and accountability, we want to make sure that we have a civilian complaint review board here in Mount Vernon, often called a CCRB. And what this does is it allows the review board will be able to substantiate complaints that we have and investigate, and also, if necessary, subpoena any records that we need to determine whether or not the complaint is substantiated, or determine what kind of discipline may be necessary. Malcolm, you can go to the next slide. Also, under policies, procedures, and training, we are encouraging the police department to enhance the use of force policy. So there's currently a very detailed use of force policy in place. What we would like to see is for that first interaction with a police officer to be one that is non-threatening in a professional attitude. So once a police officer shows up, their presence is that first level of interaction that you have, and it's a professional one. You can have a cordial conversation, etc. We want to eliminate the immediate sign of force or a threatening attitude. Also, we recommend that there's a comprehensive written matrix of discipline so that we can have more consistent discipline and that the public knows what types of discipline is warranted for any action or any violation of the matrix. Also recommending a formal policy and a co-response team to handle behavioral health calls. So what that means is for those behavioral health calls, we're looking to have a mental health professional go out with police officers so that we can handle those calls more efficiently and more effectively. So, you know, oftentimes we've seen in other communities where sometimes a mental health or behavioral health call can be escalated because of fear. So we want that mental health professional to be able to step in and use their skill set to de-escalate if possible. But we also want that mental health professional to feel safe when going out. That's why there's a co-response team there. Also recommended bystander intervention training, and this is sometimes called duty to intervene in some municipalities. We want that training to, if there's a police officer who's doing something wrong, we want their fellow officers to be able to step in and to know when to step in, right? So we want that training to include simulations and role playing so that you can have some idea, or the officers have some idea of when it's appropriate to step in. Also talked about development of a plan to increase procedural justice. So we want people to know, we think it's more effective if we can talk through the procedural justice process. And we think that'll be helpful in preventing arrests and just so that residents know and are aware of how the system works. Malcolm, you can go to the next slide. Also, qualifications, retention, and recruitment. So currently, you know, Mount Vernon is the lowest paid police department in the county, and we often lose quality officers because of that. So we're recommending that we bring our officers' pay and benefits to a point where it's commensurate with other surrounding municipalities. We also want to recruit and hire more Mount Vernon residents. We believe that if we have more Mount Vernon residents, that they would have invested interest in making sure that policing is done correctly in their own community. We're also recommending, as a part of a program that DC LACR currently has going on, which is the MVPD Well program, we're suggesting that we include some psychological assessments, you know, focused on emotional intelligence, as well as medical fitness assessments, right? Conducted periodically throughout the officer's career. So not just when you come in, you get these tests done, but we test them consistently throughout their career at different intervals. Also, we want to reinstate the Explorer program and the Police Athletic League and similar programming, right? The goal for that is to expose our local youth to our police officers and also expose them to careers in law enforcement. We think that this will help with recruitment, and it will also help building trust with our residents in the community. Malcolm, you can go to the next slide. And lastly, community engagement and equipment. So want the police department to develop a formal community engagement program. And this includes, or policy, and this includes, you know, walking block by block so that police officers can get to know the residents. Also business owners, we want them to participate in events. Also potentially carry some identification. So we've come up with, you know, sometimes police officers in other communities carry baseball cards. I think that'll be a cool way to interact with some of the youth in our community, but also to just introduce themselves to residents. And we touched on engaging with youth more. We think that developing a relationship with our youth would be really effective. You know, sometimes when there's not when there aren't programs and things in Mount Vernon, interactions with the police can be helpful to build that trust and you know, give the police officers some legitimacy in the community. We also want to have members of service to have working body cams and also car cameras during all shifts. We believe that this will help in substantiating claims. And I think it offers protection to both the police officer and the residents, right? So we want the police department to work on that and develop a policy around how body camera footage is stored and to have it maintained throughout the life of the cameras. And I think that's all we have. So as I mentioned, it's just a highlight of some of the recommendations we have. We have 43 recommendations. It's a very thorough report, and all the co-chairs really can speak to the time we spent coming up with these recommendations. And we think it's a quality set of recommendations. So we look forward to receiving some feedback around that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ms. Brown. Oh, thank you so much, Ms. Brown. So, as we put the commission together, we wanted, as Ms. Brown stated, it is a very diverse group of residents. We were very intentional about making sure that ethnicities and nationalities and neighborhoods, men, women, different sectors, whether it was government, not-for-profit, faith-based business, civically engaged people, that everyone was there. And we wanted to make sure that we had some people on the commission who had expressed a concern or a distrust with policing. And then we also put people on there who work in criminal justice, whether they're parole or probation officers, in different ways. And it was really, really important. We wanted to make sure that we had a diversity of thought at the table so that we could have very dynamic, very rigorous, sometimes very heated conversations as to what people felt were best for Mount Vernon. This was not a group of people who were put together just to give a stamp of approval. But again, we wanted to make sure that we had a diversity of thought. I believe that iron sharpens iron, and I believe that I want to thank the commission for the countless hours of work that you put together in subcommittees, working in the different key areas that you've just highlighted. You did Zoom meetings, you did community conversations. So, a lot of this work some of the reform work began in January when we came in. So as Mount Vernon, we did not wait until August when the governor issued a mandate to put together a commission. But we'd been having conversations about CCRB since January. Community conversations had been happening. Mental health and youth advisory boards were being put together to see how, and reentry advisory boards, to make sure that we were addressing some of the historic issues as well as the emerging issues. And then bringing and having a larger conversation and having this commission come in and do this official work just continued to provide greater points of intersection between the police department and the community, because it's not an either or. It's not about the community overseeing the police department. It's not about the police department dictating to the community. It is truly a partnership. And as our Senator Bailey has said, this is where we're starting, and the work will continue. The work will definitely continue. So Councilman Thompson, I know that you have another commitment right now. I wanted to just pull you into this conversation so that you could share with us some of your thoughts about the work of the Civilian Police Commission and what we're looking from the public over the next week insofar as giving their feedback.
I apologize. It is extremely loud over here, so I apologize if y'all hear the background. I'm looking at y'all so intensely because I'm reading y'all lips because I can't hear much over here. But I just have to give praise to the women of this commission. What greater thing for Women's Month as well, because the women have done a great job with this. They've been the backbone of the Police Reform Commission, and they've been doing a great job with that. So all praise to, Deputy Commissioner Lackard and Danielle Brown and Mary Kingsley and everyone. And the gentlemen, you did your thing, yes, but the women held it down. So we got to make sure that they give them their praise because they really did their thing. And, they've been working for the best of people. Like the mayor said, bridging that gap between the police and the community. So it's a necessity. And I constantly reiterate that Mount Vernon is not plagued with the issues of other communities, but there's still work to be done, and we have to make sure we stay on top of it. So I look forward to having our police reform, but as I always say, having our community reformed as well, because we have to share our best practices to bring everyone on board to make sure our community thrives. So I'm just excited.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Councilman Thompson is the chair of the Public Safety Committee on the city council. And so, but even before he was the chair of the Public Safety Committee, he'd been involved in a lot of the relationship building with the police department and work that the fire department, Office of Emergency Management, and EMS was doing. So it was just such a natural fit when January came that you took over as the chair of public safety. So thank you for always being present and ensuring that you're focusing on and dealing with the challenges. But even more importantly, Councilman Thompson, you are a person who is very solution oriented. You don't have a problem having the tough conversations about what might be a challenge or what might be concerns. But at the same time, you are very solution oriented, and you're always looking at, well, what do we need to do to resolve this, to improve services, to improve communication, and ensure that the residents of the city are getting the best service available. So thank you. And I understand if you have to jump off, like you said, you're out, and we don't want to keep you. We know you very rarely get a time to yourself. So please enjoy friends and family.
No, I'm gonna stay on to listen and continue to read the lips of everyone while this weekend. But I'm out here for dinner. But it was a necessity for me to make sure I joined on this call. So I'm just very excited to continue to work along with everyone to make sure that Mount Vernon is at its best. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Bailey, thank you. I see you over here.
Thank you so much. So we're going to bring our Deputy Commissioner Jen Lackard into this conversation. Deputy Commissioner Lackard was appointed as Deputy Commissioner of the Police Department back in July of this year. It was a historic appointment in that she is the first civilian to really be appointed to that position. A very large part of her work coming in, like I said before, the governor had put out any requests or any executive orders, was to focus on police reform, focus on implementing 21st century policing, officer wellness, mental health, homeless services, civilian complaint review board, reentry initiatives. She just had a laundry list of things that she was tasked with from the onset, and that just went in alignment with over 15 years of professional history in working around criminal justice reforms and building relationships. So with that, DC Lackard, if you can kind of just share with us some of this process and how police reform is also starting to work. I mean, how the commission has been put together, but also how it works in tandem with some of the things that are happening right now. We see the recommendations. How are we moving towards some of those recommendations already?
So thank you. I want to echo Councilman Thompson before he goes on, but also to share that, yes, the women of the commission really did do a lot of the heavy lifting. But, while Danielle is a co-chair, there were other members of the commission who were women who really did a lot of the heavy lifting. And I would be remiss if I didn't in this space acknowledge them, because it was a lot of late night writing, which was not me. And that was Anika Hall, that was Mary Kingsley, really having the time and just getting down with Danielle to figure out how this all pulls together. We had some very strong members of our commission, Tamika Coverdale, we had Joanne Dunn, Sylvia Tyree, just women who are really knowledgeable about the space. And I think we all gave life and to the 43 recommendations that the community will see. So I want to start there and say, many of our conversations were vivid, to say the least, right? And I think it speaks to the fact that you put together a very strong group of people. I don't think there's not one person on that committee or commission that's not meek and for the faint-hearted. We were all there for a particular purpose. And it's interesting for me, as you've said, sort of this is my first space really talking, if I was not tapped for this role, I could imagine myself being very, very aggressive on the other side, right, as part of the community. And now here I am on this side and really saying, how do we merge what needs to be done, what we need to see, the change that the police department has to make between what's realistic and what actually can be short-term goals, long-term goals, and how do we merge those together. And I think that conflict, what people saw, what they felt was people really caring about it and wanting to meet that mark. And I'm so grateful to be, because there's a lot of stuff that I learned in it too, in terms of my role as a leader. How am I going to bridge that gap and make sure that, April 1 is really where our job starts. It starts, using that recommendation as our guideline, as our blueprint. But there has been just an amazing amount of work that was done. And I want to sort of bring that to the helm. Going to the change, change can't be a top-down approach. It has to be an inside out. Right? If we want the police department to see change, it can't be a series of recommendations that we as a committee or a community come up with and then say, yes, now we're complying with police reform. This has to be something that we are doing that becomes who the Mount Vernon Police Department is. And I think that's something that I believe with my commissioner, who is a 24-year veteran of the department, who's been there for so long, who he understands, he probably knows where all the bodies are buried. But at the same time, when he came back, he knew what needed to be changed. And that's part of the change that we started to see earlier last year in 2020 when he came in. But it's also, you, Madam Mayor, because I remember sitting on your Public Safety Transition Committee. You acknowledge public safety being an issue and a priority here for the city of Mount Vernon. When you came in as mayor, that was one of your platforms, and it was very clear that it was a priority. So change was probably going to happen regardless of what happened in our country, because that was how you saw things. And so to be in the position that we are now and saying, how do we do this? It is correct. I believe both Danielle and Senator Jamal Bailey said, it's quality, but it's continuous. It cannot just be right now for the moment. And so many of the changes that you see that are written, I am focused on making those reality, right? And I think that's the shift that many other police departments will say, hey, listen, here's our recommendations. We have them all written in this nice and pretty, and we'll submit it. We want to be that city that takes those recommendations and make them, tangible, to make them work, and that people, when they show up and when they see police officers, when they engage, they believe it. Because, that's where it shows up. Where we show up, that's where the community says, okay, we see the change. Not just something to comply and check off a list. And I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm grateful for the people on the commission. Our job just starts. It's not tomorrow. And there's no doubt in my mind that the people who are here that are on the commission will always be here and making sure they remind me of the things that need to be done in the department. But it's community and policing working together. It's a very difficult thing for people to think that the shift really starts now. Like, we worked a lot to get the report written, but it's really what systems are we putting in place to have this open dialogue, to keep the conversations going, to become agile so we can change without a report. We shouldn't have to need a report to hear what the community needs and what that shift needs to be. And so that's a commitment that we're having, but we have to be low to the ground, be committed to hearing what needs to happen, and then figuring out quickly how can we make that change work within and throughout, from the top down to the bottom, so the community feels it, sees it, and they know that it's real.
So, again, kudos to the entire committee that worked on this. And as a woman, I'm going to give a shout out to some of the guys, because yes, the women held it down, but we had Dwayne Murray, we had Axel Eberman, we had Sean Marshall from Future FM, we had Pastor Rose, we had
David Patterson.
We had Amdam, David Patterson, we had Henry Terry and Arthur Muhammad and Will Wagstaff. So, and we had, I know Pedro Coelho was a part of this work too. So we had people from so many different areas, and each person was selected because of their passion and their role in the community. We had Daniela Jackson, who's from Mount Vernon, who's one of the directors up at the Department of Probation. She was involved. Gilda Tavares, involved through probation. As you said, Joanne Dunn, but she's running an alternative youth a community-based youth facility for young people who are dealing with criminal justice issues. So we had, Miss Tyree. Everyone knows Miss Tyree is like the other mayor, or she's the mayor. of Mount Vernon, and she has been a voice forever, and she definitely wanted to make sure that the seniors were represented and that their concerns and their issues, were at the table. And so this was a very dynamic group, and as you already said, not one person on it was shrinking violets. So one of the recommendations that's on here and is a big issue and talked about in so many different jurisdictions. I sat on the Westchester Municipal Officers Association Zoom the other night as they were talking about what was happening with the reform reports in their community. And there were some communities that adopted a CCRB. There were other communities that are not necessarily interested in having a CCRB. It's interesting because each community is very different. And that's what we always have to remember. I mean, we're not creating a police reform report for Atlanta. We're not creating a report for New Jersey. We're not even creating a report for Yonkers or New Rochelle. Ours is based on what we want to see happen here in Mount Vernon. And while we're looking at things happening all around the country, I think that we need to make sure that we don't become some of those places, but then we also look at some of the things that are happening here and that it's a blend. So, we do have the recommendation in here of a CCRB, and that's with subpoena powers and investigative powers. We did put in our 2020 budget initially an investigator for our CCRB that was pulled out, and hopefully maybe with some of this stimulus money that we're getting, that might be something we're able to fund. We had initially put in our budget for 2021, 2 social workers. And while I know our DC Lackard oversees a whole mental health network that she's really been working to build from the ground up. We've had a mental health network in Mount Vernon, but one and really focusing on how it works comprehensively with the police department, I think is very different. So we did have in the budget to bring on 2 social workers. Those were pulled out. Whether we go after funding or we do, again, some stimulus monies for right now, that's still something that we want to see happen, because it's good to have a partnership with other organizations. But as a social worker, I can say it's even better to have our person working within the department. They can provide that training. I ran a SNUG program for 10 years. And then towards the end of the SNUG program, as I was transitioning in, about a year before I became mayor, the Division of Criminal Justice Services saw fit to make sure that all of the SNUG teams around the state had a certified social worker on their team, because trauma-informed care is important. De-escalating people who have emotional disturbances and mental health challenges, that is very, very important, and it needs to be a coordinated approach. The other thing that you put in the recommendation that we had in our budget again was a public information officer, because someone who can continuously update the website, manage the social media pages, press conferences, they'll help coordinate press conferences, but the press conferences pretty much will be done by the command staff, but they'll help coordinate that and do the press releases. But like you said, monthly reports that are put up on the website, things of that nature, pushing that information out to the community so that the community can get it with 2 or 3 clicks. That's definitely something we want. But another thing that a public information officer is really good for is giving public safety tips. That's when I worked in Yonkers, I worked closely with the public information officer, and they always pushed out, this is what to do during the summer, this is what to do around the holidays. And so it's also giving out information around prevention. I saw in there that you had a recommendation around the Youth Explorers, which I know has been run by Detective Dave Clark. That's something we want to bring back. We have our Civilian Police Academy in Mount Vernon, which I went through in 2000. That's an incredible program. So if people are interested, please reach out. And the PAL. So since August, we've been having conversations with some businessmen who approached the police department and my office, saying that they're really interested in bringing the PAL back to Mount Vernon. And so we're excited about that. We have identified space over at the Dole Center. We are working with architects and designers and construction companies and some finance people to really look at what this project is going to cost, and they are interested in financing it. So, you know, there are some things that are in the works, and so this is really symbiotic. And clearly, when you say that we need to pay our police more, we know that, and that's going to be a heavy lift, because I think our starting pay is almost about $15,000 lower than the next community. And that's not going to change overnight, but we have to start making movement, because we do, and we have lost, and we continue to bleed. Yes, if you could make that a little bigger. So Mount Vernon's starting pay is $45,000, and the next lowest starting pay is New Rochelle or White Plains at $53,000, and then New Rochelle at $55,000. Yonkers, their starting pay is $72,000. So that's a big difference. You know, Rye is a town. We're not in competition with them, and they're a much wealthier community. I mean, look, they're a much wealthier community. They have a smaller police department, but we have to make sure that we are doing what is necessary, and that we have a real plan to move these salaries into better parity with surrounding communities. I want to speak just for a second, because I know one of the recommendations is that we hire more people from Mount Vernon. So we do have the Mount Vernon police exam, which is coming up in May. We've been promoting it. I know our police are out on the ground. They're pushing that information. We need everyone in the community. See, you know, this is where you put your money where your mouth is, because everyone says, oh, we need more Mount Vernon police. Oh, we need more Black police. But if we tear down the profession of policing, it makes it difficult for our young people in Mount Vernon and our young professionals in Mount Vernon to say, oh, this is something I think I might want to do. They won't take our test locally, but they'll take the county test, or they'll take the New Rochelle or the White Plains. They'll take another community's test. And so the only way that we're going to see more and better representation on the police department from our community is if we really start, all of us, as citizens, from the churches to the neighborhood associations to the conversations around the dinner table, start talking to our young people and those under the age of 32, 33, I think it's like 35 is the age limit, about pursuing a career in policing. It's very important that that is something that we start lifting up. So the deadline to apply for the May 15th test is April 20th. April 20th, so you can get applications here at Mount Vernon City Hall, the Mount Vernon Police Department. If the library was open, we would have it at the library in different places. But you can, I mean, you can get applications at City Hall, you can get applications at the police department. You can go online at www.cmvny.com. I would really tell you to start pursuing this tomorrow. Start pursuing this tomorrow. Go up, get those applications, look and see what you have to do, because there are some people who miss the deadline because they come in and get the papers 2 or 3 days beforehand, and then they realize that there are so much more information that they have to hand in with this application other than just birth certificates and things of that nature. So please look at that. The other thing is also reach out to our training unit at pd.cmvny.com. There are opportunities for people to come in and get free support and assistance in preparing for the police test, because it is a ranked test, and you were scored based on your scores. You're ranked as to how you're able to get hired. Mount Vernon residents clearly get preference, but you know, after that, it's an open list insofar as how you score. So we're asking, you know, this is something you have to study for. You have to do your paperwork, and you should start studying right now if you want to take that test on May 15th. And we can connect you with our go back. Do we have any major questions or comments from the community, Malcolm? I just want to. We have about 13 minutes left. We don't have any major questions. So there is a public comment period. And if you could speak to us about that, there's a public comment period from now until a week from today, next Sunday. And then there's going to be another few community conversations or town hall meetings about this police reform initiative that we want people to tune into. So if you can speak to that issue.
You got a DC Lackett, or you want me to jump in?
I can. I believe Malcolm is uploading the image. So there are a few things. One, our Citizens Police Academy is starting April 6th. So if there's anyone in the community, I know we had a prior community conversations and we got quite a few people from the community who joined. So if there's anyone who wants to join the Citizens Police Academy, the 10-week session, you can also email trainingunit@pd.cmvny.com. The same one for the police exam flyer or application. But tomorrow, as well as Tuesday and Wednesday, is what we'll have for our community conversations, but it's police reform edition. The only focus of the conversation, we won't talk about police stats this month. We won't talk about anything other than getting feedback from the community on the 43 recommendations that Danielle Brown reviewed sort of at a high level, but we can go into those. So we're encouraging everyone to take a look, download the report on the website, on social media, and take a look at those. And what we'll do tomorrow from 10 to 11:30, we will have, if you're familiar with community conversations, a main session where we'll talk about what the needs are and what the recommendations are. And then we'll break out into breakout rooms. And then what we'll do, we'll have each session, we'll break them up into like 1 to 10, 11 to 20, and everyone will be able to give feedback on those sets of questions, and they can go in and out of breakout rooms so that we really get to hear not just a comment, not just an email, a comment in the chat, but really how people feel about the recommendations and sort of where we can go. I mean, I should note that this is a final report. This is a final draft of the report that was presented to City Council. However, this week as a group, as a commission, we are looking at the sessions and feedback from tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday that are being offered at different times in case anyone is available at different times throughout the day. And then we're meeting on Thursday to look at all that, take feedback, and put it together in a report so that City Council gets to see everything that we're hearing from you. But again, tomorrow is Monday from 10 to 11:30. The upload should be in the actual link. There's also one on Tuesday from 1 to 2:30. So if you're available in the afternoon, there's an afternoon session on Tuesday. And then Wednesday is from 6 to 7:30. If by chance you're working and you don't have any availability during the day, the evening is the time when we'll have that session. If for some reason you have any questions, you can always email reform@pd.cmvny.com, and that will get myself or someone on my team, and we'll reply to you with additional information. But again, this is an ongoing process. It does not end this week. However, for the report and us getting feedback on the 43 recommendations, we're going to have that put out to you Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week. So please do not let that stop. Don't think, oh, there's no opportunity. Also, as the mayor alluded to, I've created community councils that have been in operation since last year. So there's a Behavioral Health Advisory Council, there's a Reentry, as well as a Youth Advisory Council. Starting April 1, I will have a Police Reform Council. So if there's anyone who wants to sit on that, it will meet monthly, usually on the 2nd and the 4th Wednesday of the month. From 3 to 4:30. And that's just, again, a way to engage with me, a small group of people. Like our Behavioral Health Advisory Council has 42 people. That's a large group, but we do it well on Zoom. And so we want to engage. And this is sort of keeping us on track too, looking at where we are with our recommendations every month, assessing how far are we from where we should be. Looking at when we do community conversations, what's the content that we lift up to the community that either we're not doing or that we should be doing. So that, again, that's a way of having an agile process. That Police Reform Advisory Council is post the report that we are ordered and mandated by Executive Order 203 to comply with. Post April 1st, what are we doing? What does that look like? And I think this is an opportunity for the community to opt in. They can opt into the Citizens Police Academy. They can opt in to being a part of the Police Reform Advisory Council. They can participate in our quarterly community conversations by Zoom. So our next one will be June after the one this week, the sessions this week. But again, there are going to be tons of things that I'm working on that I think I'm super excited about bringing it to you. So Mayor Patterson, we've talked about maybe doing something later as we're ready to like unroll our entire plan, so the community gets to see all the different pieces and what that looks like in terms of engagement with youth and other vulnerable populations in the city of Mount Vernon. So I'm happy to see that where we are. This has been a laborious process, but it's been amazing for all of us really to just see where we all are and how we can partner up moving forward. You're not going to always like what other people say, but it's how are we able to get together and see where those commonalities are and where we do converge so that we can do something. So those are the opportunities we have this week, and hopefully we get to see everyone on Community Conversations. You get to tell us exactly what you think about each recommendation. That's again tomorrow from 10 to 11:30, Tuesday from 1 to 2:30, and Wednesday from 6 to 7:30. Any questions can be emailed to reform@pd.cmvny. And again, it's reform@pd.cmvny.com.
Also, they have the web's email address is communications@cmvny.com. So that's another email address that you can utilize. So someone posted in the chat, where can you find it? So Malcolm just put the links into the chat. You can find them on Mayor Shawyn Patterson Howard's site. But also if you
as well as CMVNY, it'll also be on the CMVNY Facebook page. People, please share it. Share it on your Facebook pages. Email it, send it in an email blast to your friends. People have said, well, why aren't you mailing this out? Bottom line is because we don't have access to postage to mail it out. You know, we have an ongoing issue with financially with the comptroller, and we just cannot do a mailing to all of the residents in Mount Vernon, and we just don't have the time also to go and deliver it person to person. So if you know, it's interesting. People on social media go, well, how do you get access to it? You're on social media, you share it. Be partners with us in sharing it with your friends, your families, your church members, your business partners. This is something that we're all doing together. So please help us push this information out to the community. We want feedback from everyone. And again, the Reform Commission and the work of police reform is not just anti-police. If you have something good, if you have some good experiences, if you have a police officer that you want to lift up, that you want to encourage, and you want to talk about positive interactions, we want to hear all of that information. This is not just an exercise in how we can tear down the police. It's an exercise is how we can lift up best practices and what's working, how we can identify what challenges we have, and how we can start making intentional and substantial efforts to improve them. This is not a ceremonial exercise. This is not an exercise that we ask people to use their time to and their energy and time away from their families just to create a report to sit on the shelf and check off a box and say we do it. This will be used as a guideline and will be actively referred back to constantly. And we'll even turn it into a sort of a report card so that we are reporting out to the community on what we're doing and how we're doing it. These recommendations will be turned into some short-term goals, some medium-term goals, and some long-term goals, because some of them are going to require funding, and everything is not going to happen overnight, but we are going to put most urgent attention and energy to the things that we can, that are really safety concerns and that we could also do without a lot of funding immediately. So we have like 3 minutes left. Any closing words as we finish out? Again, please go onto cmvny.com, come into the city hall, go into the police department. If you know someone who is interested in taking the test for the police department, have them pick up that application, bring it back by April 20th, but then also connect with the training unit at the police department or the Guardians Association so you can begin to prepare to take the police exam. We really, really want our Mount Vernon residents to take it. We want diversity, men, women, Spanish, English, Portuguese, whatever language you speak. We want you to come in and be prepared. We want to make sure that we're able to serve all of the residents of our community and that our police department represents that diversity.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to say that this has been a conversation led by amazing women, and I thank Attorney Brown and DC Lacker, but I didn't thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be on not just tonight, but to be on the commission. It's critically important that not just in March, but every month we lift up the women in our community who do amazing things. I just want to say that when you sit in the Senate under the leadership of Andrea Stewart-Cousins, you know when to sit back and let the women run the show, and they certainly have been doing so on this commission and throughout the city and state. And I just want to say thank you for all that you do. And I just wanted to underline the fact that as a legislator, I just want the constituents of Mount Vernon to know that we're amenable to listening to policy ideas that you have for ongoing legislation. There have been things such as continuing police education, much like CLE for lawyers. That's a bill that Senator Parker has that I put through the Codes Committee a couple of weeks ago. So we have a lot of things that we're going to try to do at the state level, and I'd like to hear what you have to do. Senator J. Bailey at nysenate.gov. You can email me your ideas, your concerns. I just want to say thank you once again.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I also want to send a shout out to some of our committee members that we left off, and I don't want anyone to feel slighted. So DC Lacker, you may need to help me with the pronunciation of some last names, but we got Amy from the Guidance Center. Gallus. Yes, we got Amy, Cynthia Turnquest Jones, also Vincent Stefano, all been a part of the commission, and I don't want anyone to feel slighted. Everyone put in a lot of work on this, so I want
Kathy Marmalade host.
Yes. Also,
I didn't have a list in front of me, so
no worries.
I'm glad you pulled it up. You guys have done incredible work, and I just want to thank you for your diligence. And DC Lacker, do you have any final comments as we close out?
Now it's just time to get to work. I'm looking forward to sort of what the next step is. Stop talking about it. Time to do it. So I'm looking forward to the execution of this work.
Excellent. And again, I'm going to always say and close out with those same reminders. April 6th is the next Mount Vernon Civilian Police Academy. So please, the Civilian Police Academy, it's a great program. You learn a lot. We also had Ara's lady from our office that served as a liaison, making sure from the mayor's office that the commission received the information they needed from us. Please, April 20th, deadline to get in your applications, May 15th, the test. Tomorrow and Tuesday and Wednesdays, community conversations, and the deadline to submit your comments on the report is next Sunday, March 21st. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your dedication. And we look forward, like we said, this is just the first stop on the train, and we're going to continue this train all the way into the station of police reform and improve public safety and trust in the city of Mount Vernon. God bless everyone. Have an incredible evening, and thank you again. Stay.